I live in a substantially normal neighborhood. I can't really say that the people here are shady. Most of them are just old. To give a little background of my town, most of the streets are parallel to each other, especially the section I live in. There's a lot of young people moving in because many of the old people in town are moving into nursing homes or, unfortunately, dying. I think it would be safe to say I know most of the people who live in the area. Not personally, but I can recognize faces. Last year, my friends and I decided to go out trick-or-treating one final time. We were acting like angsty teenagers who thought it wasn't cool anymore, but we had already gotten costumes and wanted some candy. However, while we thought it wasn't cool anymore, looking back, I don't think trick-or-treating is safe anymore, truly. Anyway, I had to play a field hockey game after school, so I was itching to hang out with my friends. I finally headed home and got my costume on. At this point, it was getting dark, so my mom demanded I bring a flashlight. She's very protective and kind of strict. My dad, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. He's more willing to let me go places on my own, and convinced my mom it would be okay if I went out trick-or-treating with a group of friends. My mom doesn't like there not being a parent around, but she knew we would stay within a couple of streets. Eventually, she let up and allowed me to go. My friends began to show up at my house, but by the time we left it was pitch black. Once again, my mother warned me about strangers. I scoffed at her, trying to shake off the embarrassment of being lectured by my mom in front of my friends. I knew she was right, though. Maybe a group of high school girls could take down a predator, but I knew I couldn't by myself. I stayed as close as I could with my friends for most of the night, keeping an eye out for any weird figures or killer clowns, since there were rumors of some terrorizing in elementary school a few towns over. Everything seemed to be going well, and we were all having a good time, apart from trying to avoid our classmates out of sheer humility for trick-or-treating. All my friends and I made some really good memories. Then it happened. It was around 8:45, and some of my friends were tired and wanted to be picked up. We gradually made it back to my house, where they phoned their parents and left. I was a little upset. It might have been my inner child in me, but I wanted more candy. I knew this was quite possibly my last year trick-or-treating ever. I wasn't ready to give it up yet. My one friend, we'll call her Nancy, did not want to stop yet either. After all my other friends left, we asked my parents if we could go out for another 30 minutes or so. My mom was reluctant, however my dad told her that I was old enough, and most people wouldn't answer doors this late anyway, so we'd be back pretty soon. It was around 9:10 after this point. Nancy and I went to the next street over in the opposite direction we went with our group previously. I remember feeling uncomfortable for some reason, but brushing it off as I turned on my flashlight. It was pitch black, and the sidewalks are bumpy and cracked because the town is too lazy to fix them. I had a pretty bright flashlight that could shine a good 20 feet ahead of me. We made it to the next street and looked down. There were barely any porch lights on. I guess people figured the little kids were done, and decided it was the end of the night. However, Nancy and I were not willing to give up, and started at the first house on the left. No answer. We went through the street that had a porch light on. No answer from that house either. I still wasn't willing to stop, though. We tried a few more houses and got no answers. Nancy suggested we try 3 other houses, and if no one answered, then we would go back to my place. I agreed, sadly knowing that no one would give us candy this late into the night, and that this was the end. That's when I saw him out of the corner of my eye. It was a black figure, walking down the road towards the house me and Nancy were standing at. He was wearing all black, with his face down and a hood on over his head. Something about him made my stomach lurch. I discreetly pointed him out to Nancy. She said she saw him a few houses before, just turning onto the street. This made me feel even more uneasy. Quickly, he began to approach us with his head down and his hands in his sweatshirt pocket. Looking back, Who knows what he could have been hiding in there? The street was dead quiet, except for me and Nancy, so he must have heard us. I told Nancy we should go to the house across the street, to make it seem like we were trick-or-treating and never noticed him. We went to the house and knocked on the door. I was secretly praying someone would answer so the man couldn't get near. But no one did. I was really freaking out now. I turned around and he was walking on the street in front of the house right next to us. Then I realized he had crossed the street too. A wave of panic overtook me. I grabbed Nancy's arm and sprinted to the house he had just passed. Then he circled around and began following us in the same direction. I knew I had to do something. He began walking faster and faster towards us. Nancy and I sprinted for it. There's a good amount of space in between this street and mine, but I was on track and was willing to do anything to get away from this psychopath. He didn't run. But when I finally looked back, I saw him quickly walking the same way, still with his head down. From what I could tell, he seemed fairly young, maybe his early 30s. I didn't recognize anyone like this from the area. Nancy and I were still running, though. Finally, we made it to my street, and we hid near some bushes at the end. Then I realized we still had our flashlights on, and that's how he was so easily able to locate us. We shut them off, crouched near the bushes, and waited. I knew that if we tried to run to my house, he would see us. There wasn't enough time to make it there without him getting to the end of the street and seeing us. I was also terrified that he would find out where I lived. Never bring someone who's following you back to your house. Nancy and I finally saw him. He stood in the middle of the street and just peered down it. I could see his eyes, that's how close we were. They looked so blank and menacing. He knew we were here somewhere, just not in the bushes only 10 feet away. After a few moments, he carried on walking. Nancy and I waited until he was at the next street. We could see him walking down the sidewalk, and then we booked it to my house. I told my parents, but my father only laughed, and my mother looked too tired to care. My brother sat there and made fun of me for being paranoid. I'm never going trick-or-treating again. Who knows what could have happened to me that night, or what that man was capable of. Later, there was a news story about children who had been abducted a few towns over. Instead, it could have been me and Nancy. So, creepy Halloween stalker, let's not meet. When I was 17, I moved to college 2 hours away from my home and took residence in the dorms on campus. The dorms were not run through the school, but through a management company. There were a lot of safety problems in the dorms as a result of this. Assaults, ODs, drugs, shootings right outside, etc. I am a female who weighs 100 pounds, so I always watched out for any sort of serious situation around me. Everything was great. I had some awful roommates, but I was mostly left alone. One day in September, I was leaving for class early in the morning when I spotted a condom taped to my name tag on the door. It had a note that said, "Call me XOXO," with some random phone number on it. I told the RAs and nothing came of it. I just thought it was some random prank pulled by one of the guys on the floor. Things went south with my roommates, mostly because of my night terrors, quote-unquote, scaring them, even though I warned them before we even agreed to be roommates. So I was moved into a 2-bedroom dorm with my new roommate Jay. We each had our own room. After a week of living there, I started noticing that things were appearing in the living room while we were sleeping. I asked Jay about it, and she vehemently denied it was her. One day, we noticed the lock on the front door did not lock properly. If you pulled on the lock and twisted the handle at the same time, the door would come open. Around the same time, I started getting Snapchats of inappropriate things. Vague threats and offers for a great carnal pleasure. I would get ones that would say things like, "You look great today with that specific article of clothing I was wearing." I filed a report to the dorms to get the lock fixed, but it took 4 months. 8 complaints, a threat of legal action, and my friend D yelling at them to get any action. We got our door fixed, but the presence still appeared outside of the door with notes for me. I was still receiving Snapchats, but I moved out of the dorms into an apartment with my then boyfriend. The Snapchats continued. Then I started getting calls at my work. I worked for the dean's office of my college, and I was in charge of answering phones. Every day I would get 3 or more calls from randomly generated numbers. I discovered it was through apps like Viber and Skype after I reported it to the police and they investigated. I would answer the phone. "CLAS Dean's office, this is Fontapants, how may I help you?" I would hear heavy breathing for a few seconds, then they would hang up. I thought it was just some 12-year-old pranking our office until my coworker got a call. She answered with her name, and the person on the line asked if they could speak with me. Thinking it was one of the deans that I had been working with, she forwarded it to my phone. I answered and I received the same heavy breathing, and I hung up. I reported it to my boss. She did nothing. One of the deans overheard the conversation and reported it to Title IX. Oh boy, talking to them was a mistake. After the meeting with them, the threat started getting worse, and this person found me in my new apartment. One day in September, I was dog-sitting 2 wonderful dogs who hated other dogs and would bark at them on sight. It was around 11 p.m., and I decided to take them out before bed. We get outside. To the right of me is a bunch of thick trees that are hard to see through. I start to take the girls to the grass on the left. They start growling and barking at something in the trees. Thinking it's another dog, I try to pull them away, but they won't budge. I glance over, and out of the trees comes a tall man. But the weird thing is, he's wearing a Michael Myers-like mask. He starts rushing towards me. The dogs get between me and him. He stops. I run up the stairs behind me into the apartment, as he is disappearing into the trees again. Stupidly, I don't call the police, but I see him one more time before I move to my new apartment. Things are quiet for a while. My boyfriend and I break up, and I spend the first few days in the new apartment alone. Come to find out, the window that can be accessed from the ground doesn't lock. One morning I wake up, everything seems normal. I check the mirror to do my hair for work, and I have a bald spot. My head was shaved in the middle of the night. I find my hair tied up in knots in an envelope. I immediately call the police. They do an investigation, find the window was broken, but can't find anything to figure out who it was that came into my apartment. They ask me to compile a list of everything that was missing, and the only thing gone other than my hair was 3 pairs of dirty underwear. I have photos of the hair and bald spot if anyone is interested. An investigation finds no one. I have since moved. I no longer answer phones at my work, and I keep bear spray next to my bed at all times. I had a stalker from Xbox Live try to find me 2 days ago at work. I'm only 17 and work second shift at my local movie theater. It was Friday night. My weekend had just begun. I was on Xbox Live and playing Overwatch and eating now cold pizza, like a lot of my friends were. I was kicking considerable ass, more than I usually was at this game, and was on fire for 3 matches. At around 2 a.m., I decided to step up my game and go into competitive mode. I got into a match at King's Row, and I was playing Pharah on defense. I got a 15-player kill streak, but I noticed 5 of those kills were on the same guy, a Bastion. I remember his username. The match goes on for about another minute, and then I get an invite to a party. The gamertag was the same as the Bastion I just killed for the 6th time. I wasn't in a party, since all of my friends had called it a night except for me at that point. I decided that whatever he wanted to say could be interesting, so I added him. Now, I usually expect some kids a few years younger than me to be shit-talking me, but to my surprise, it was a grown man on the other end. More to my surprise, he sounded in his 30s rather than closer to my age, and he had a thick Spanish accent. Immediately, this guy starts cussing me out. I can't lie when I say I half expected this to happen when I got a party invite. Now, I have the mentality where if you're a jerk to me, I'll return the favor. I replied with the classic, "Oh, you mad, bro?" Guy doesn't acknowledge what I say. Instead of saying he would f my mom like most people did, this guy said, "F you, f your entire family. I will make sure to decapitate your mother and make your dad f her in the goddamn neck hole." I was sort of shocked by this, but it didn't last. "Bro, take a chill pill." "No, I want you to..." He stopped. I noticed why. A diva on our team had just killed his Bastion hero again. Now this is where things get scary. It sounded as if he turned into a rabid animal that was trying to suffocate itself on the mic, and screaming, and howling, and spitting, all at the same time. It's difficult to describe exactly what sound he was making, but that's the closest I can do. Inhuman noises were coming from this person, as if he was being gutted and possessed by a demon at the same time. It was a grown man, too, which made the entire thing scary compared to laughing my ass off when a 12-year-old loses it. The match ended. The enemy team didn't even get the payload moving. The man loses his shit some more because he lost. Then I decided to be an a-hole again and not take this clearly crazy guy's shit. Look, it's not my fault you suck at this game. You're just being treated like the child you really are. Grow the hell up, man. The guy didn't like this. He just hollered, "F*** you!" into the microphone. For no joke, 20 seconds. It started getting all crackly. He was being so loud, he was breaking his mic. He then removed me from the party. I decided that since the match was over, I should call it a night, just like my friends had. My overall reaction to what went down was, okay, that was something. I logged out, turned off my Xbox, and went to bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I realized how much of a dumbass I was for not recording any of it. My friends would have lost it when they heard it. Then I fell asleep. Saturday went by with nothing, and I thought that was that with the angry man from Overwatch. Sunday was after Saturday, and I logged onto my Xbox that morning to play more. I noticed I had a message from the guy saying, "Good morning," with my full name. "I know you have to go to," and he listed the address of the movie theater I work at, "tomorrow." "What the hell?" I said aloud. I decided to pull out my phone and take a picture of the TV screen. Then I texted my boss about it, and told her that some guy on Xbox somehow found out where I worked. Now my boss is a bitchy old lady, so she naturally didn't care what happened on Xbox, even though it concerned my work. She just blew it off and told me I still had to come in the next day. Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, and The Incredible 2s were both hot right now, so we were going to be busy. I ended up coming in the next day at 5:30. It was pretty boring and busy like I predicted, up until about 8, when a super short guy came in through the door. It was loud and pretty crowded, but the guy hollers my full name. Same thick Spanish accent from Xbox. Oh no, it was him. I still to this day don't know where he got my info from, or why he decided to come all the way out to where I worked. The theater fell silent. I just walked to the back room where my boss was, and told her that the guy from Xbox was inside. She repeated the whole, "I don't care what happens to you on Xbox, get back to work, we're busy," rant that she had texted me. I repeated to her that the guy was inside the building. I didn't know if he wanted to hurt me or not, and that I was going to call the cops. I ended up actually calling the cops. It wasn't until they arrived and spoke to me privately in the back room that my boss ended up taking me seriously. The man was still inside the lobby, and the cops put him in cuffs and walked out. This is according to my boss. I was in the back room, so I couldn't witness it. I still haven't heard anything from the cops, and I still don't know how he found my info, or why he came all the way to where I worked. And I still don't know what he planned to do to me. Either way, I'm still a bit shaken up over it. I don't know if he knows my home address or not either, and I'm pretty much on guard 24/7. Either way, I own 2 dogs that can scare off anyone, but I'm still pretty terrified of this guy. So, insane and pissed off guy from Xbox that stalks teenagers and visits them. I hope I never have to meet you again. Right after I graduated high school, I went to our community college where my best friend at the time and her boyfriend also attend, along with a lot of their friends who I became acquainted with as well. Fast forward to Halloween of 2010, we took my best friend's little sister and brother out trick-or-treating, where her boyfriend ended up joining us. We were towards the end of the route when one of the friends from the college ended up joining us, which I didn't think anything about at the time, other than he gave me weird vibes. Should have been my first clue. After we were done trick-or-treating, we brought the kids home to go to bed. But my friends wanted to go do something to keep the night going, since it was Halloween and in a college town. That's an excuse to party just like any other day. They decided on going downtown, but I declined since I wasn't feeling well, which was true. But I was also the only one with a car and didn't want to be the chauffeur, and went home. A few hours later, I was in bed reading a book. I still lived with my mom and brother, and my phone lit up from a number I didn't recognize. It was the friend that joined us while trick-or-treating. He explained that he got my number from my best friend's boyfriend, and he was concerned that I didn't feel well, and insisted on bringing me soup to feel better. Some sort of red flag went off in my head, and I didn't want this guy to know where I lived, so I said no, my mom was taking care of it, but thank you anyway. He got a little pushy, but eventually backed down and proceeded to send me many texts about how much fun we had when we were out and blah blah blah. I later found out he bailed going downtown too, because he only wanted to go with me. He then added me to Facebook, went through all of my pictures and liked all of them. Second red flag. Being the naive 18-year-old I was, I thought maybe he was being overly friendly, and it was just a little weird. So I didn't avoid him or anything at school, since we hung out with the same people. One day, when we didn't have school, he texted me asking if I wanted to go to lunch. I should have said no, but I accepted, thinking I was getting a free meal out of the deal since he insisted on paying, and it would be a quick visit. We met at the restaurant, and sat down and talked and ate. It was super awkward, and then I stupidly mentioned I wanted to go to the mall to get some stuff. He insisted on driving me there and that his mom can move to the back seat. Wait, what? Apparently he drove his mom's minivan, brought her with him, and left her in the car while we went on our date. I kept saying that she should come in and join us, and he got really weird about it, and said she was napping, and she didn't mind waiting. At that point, I started getting very uncomfortable. Luckily, we were done with our food, and I said I needed to leave, thanked him for the food, and got up to go. He kept saying he'll meet me at the mall, and I was put in what I felt was a very weird position, and I am not an assertive person, so I reluctantly said okay. We met at a large store connected to the mall, and I mentioned how I was here to look for a new scarf, and started browsing. He picked out the most expensive one he could find, and bought it for me, and basically almost threatened me not to return it. It was then I wanted to be left alone, so I said thank you, and I was going to go home now. He insisted on walking me out to my car. We were parked on opposite ends of the mall, and his mom was still in the van, and I kept saying it was okay, I was fine. He was a big guy, and even simple walking caused him to break out in a sweat, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, so away we went. We passed by another shop and took a quick peek inside. There were a pair of boots that I very quickly in passing mentioned were cute, but I don't know if I'd wear them. He bought them for me, and did the same somewhat threat not to return them, because they were gifts, and you don't return gifts. Like, dude, then what are gift receipts for? At that point, I got a little firm, and told him I wanted time alone, so please don't walk me out to my car. He accepted and went his merry way, clearly happy that he made those purchases to show me he liked me. I go out to my car and wait for probably 20 minutes. I knew what his van looked like at that point and kept my eye out for it, in case he was going to follow me home. But I didn't see anything. I actually ended up going back to the mall and returned the boots and scarf. In reality, I didn't want either of them, and I was way too uncomfortable accepting those gifts from a strange person. I don't like owing people, and I had a feeling he was going to use that as some sort of leverage to get something from me. I took the long way home to make sure I wasn't being followed, and told my mom about what had happened. She was concerned, and thought it was strange as well, since he and I didn't really know each other, and it seemed like a weird act of desperation. I got a text from him a few hours later saying he hoped I liked his gifts. I responded saying that I returned them because I wasn't comfortable with it, and he lost it. My phone kept lighting up with tons of texts. This was before it was easy to block someone, and I didn't know how to. And he was livid that I did such a disrespectful thing. I should be thankful he got those things for me. So I got angry and told him I didn't ask him for the gifts. He basically threatened me to keep them, and he didn't take no for an answer when I told him I didn't want them. So essentially, he was the one who disrespected me. He backed down a lot then. I told him to stop texting me and leave me alone. I got a few more texts, but eventually he stopped. It was weird at school because I kind of avoided being around my friends when I knew he was there. I still hung out with some of them alone, like my best friend, but when I knew a friend gathering was going on, I wouldn't go. They understood. Now this is where I got stupid. I am a very, very compassionate person, and 9 out of 10 times, I feel horrible when I was mean to someone, even in this instance. I ended up texting the creeper one night apologizing for how rude I was to him, and he said he understood where I was coming from, and we had a normal conversation for a little bit, until I fell asleep around 11 p.m. I know this because I woke up at 2 a.m., looked at my phone, and saw the last text I sent him was a little before 11, stating I was tired. After I fell asleep, he sent me one text. Saw I didn't respond, texted again, saw I didn't respond, kept texting. We're talking on the verge of like 30 to 40 texts here. Called me from his cell phone about 10 times, called me from another number about 15 times, because he thought I was ignoring him, and then sent one last threatening message. If you don't respond within half an hour, I'm calling the police. I happened to wake up at 2 a.m., which was an hour after he sent the text, and flipped the fuck out, texting him that I fell asleep, and he better have not called the police. You want to know why he called the police? Because he interpreted me saying I was tired as I was tired of living. He thought I killed myself. Never mind that it was, basically bedtime when he and I were talking, so yes, me killing myself is the most logical route to take here. I ran into my mom's room, told her what happened, and she goes, "For crying out loud, they have better things to do with their time, they aren't coming to check on you." I go back to my room, which looked out to our driveway. I look out the window and see a cop car parked on the street with 2 flashlights walking up the drive. They knock on the door. I opened it, and I'm pretty sure the look on my face told them everything. "You, Sally?" "Yep." "Do you know why we're here?" "Yep." "So what happened?" "I fell asleep." The police understood and actually called the creep back and told him to leave me the fuck alone. Just as I was texting him to leave me the fuck alone. He then had the gall to ask for my address again. He had done this numerous times, to come over and apologize to me, and that he loved me. I told him he doesn't even know me, and he had absolutely no reason to be in love with me. His reasoning was that's how he worked. He fell in love first, and then decided if it was the right person or not. Dude was loony. This put a really big strain on my friendships at the college. His story was much more twisted, and painted me as the bad guy, and I ended up making a lot of enemies. Even with my best friend, because he labeled me as a whore. There was another guy interested in me as well among those friends, but he was much less assertive, and I didn't give him the time of day, and everyone believed him, even though at the time I was still a virgin. I had to drop out of school because that circle of friends was so big, and whenever the creep saw me, he would get irrationally angry and his friends had to physically hold him back, which was a lot of people because he was massive. I since cut contact with all of them, and ended up going to a different school that I loved so much more. And I'm in a much better place without all of them in my life. So, creep from school, I hope I never have to see you again.